Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This file is being recorded for the November 2023 edition of Socialism for All, and it's an audiobook and discussion of The Conference of the RSDLP Groups Abroad by Lenin from 1915. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee at patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. There are links to Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the description below. This viewer support keeps this channel non-commercial and ad-free. So, this piece was written not later than February 19, 1915. It was first published March 29, 1915 in Sozialdemokrat number 40. Published here according to that text. The source is Lenin Collected Works, Progress Publishers, 1974, Volume 21, HTML transcription and markup by D. Walters and R. Simbala, and it's in the public domain at the Lenin Internet Archive within the Marxists Internet Archive. Marxists.org thanks as usual to MIA for hosting this, and thousands of other free Marxist texts. So before we begin reading, I just want to point out that this piece is a follow-up piece that I'm adding to our reading of Lenin's A Caricature of Marxism and Imperialist Economism. That text covered a number of topics related to imperialism, what Lenin called the highest stage of capitalism, what we sometimes call capitalist imperialism, characterized by the formation of large trusts or monopolies, the significant involvement of the state in the economy, the exporting of capital, as the newly created home market becomes saturated and the bourgeoisie has to look outside its borders in search of sufficient profits to continue going, the redivision of the world as imperialists compete for the right to exploit various territories of the world. And it's this last point which leads us to the question of inter-imperialist competition, a process which has begun diplomatically but which can spill over into inter-imperialist warfare. World War I was an example of this, and Lenin laid out a very clear Marxist position on what do proletarians do in that situation when fighting for our class interests, and that's reject the war, embrace a policy of revolutionary defeatism. That is, defeat of all the bourgeois governments, instead of trying to pick one side over the other. Turn the imperialist war into a class war for social revolution. Lenin discussed this in a number of texts from this general period, 1914, 15, 16, and so on. And in fact, this topic caused a major rift within the socialist movement at that time. It basically led to the destruction of the Second Socialist International, led by figures like the German Karl Kautsky, who at one time had been a prominent Marxist, and then led the sellout of the European working class as he endorsed the war under slogans like defense of the fatherland. Lenin rejected that framing as bourgeois and opportunist, and when Lenin and the Bolsheviks actually led their country to successful social revolution, demonstrating the correctness of the revolutionary defeatism position, they set up the Third Communist International to replace the old corrupt opportunist Second International. So that topic is discussed in this piece. Let's begin. Held in Switzerland, a conference of the RSDLP groups whose members are resident abroad concluded its work several days ago. Besides discussing purely foreign affairs, which we shall try briefly to comment on in the next issues of the Central Organ, the conference framed resolutions on the important and burning question of the war. We are publishing these resolutions forthwith in the hope that they will prove of use to all social democrats who are earnestly seeking the way towards live work from the present-day welter of opinions which boil down to an acknowledgement of internationalism in word and an urge to come to terms at any cost with social-chauvinism in deed. We might add that, on the question of the United States of Europe's slogan, the discussion was purely political, it being decided that the question be deferred pending a discussion in the press of the economic aspect of the matter. The conference's resolutions. The conference, which stands on the basis of the Central Committee's manifesto, as published in number 33, lays down the following principles designed to bring system into propaganda. On the character of the war. The present war is imperialist in character. This war is the outcome of conditions in an epoch in which capitalism has reached the highest stage in its development, in which the greatest significance attaches not only to the export of commodities, but also to the export of capital, an epoch in which the cartelization of production and the internationalization of economic life have assumed impressive proportions. Colonial policies have brought about the almost complete partition of the globe. World capitalism's productive forces have outgrown the limited boundaries of national and state divisions, and the objective conditions are perfectly ripe for socialism to be achieved. The defense of the fatherland slogan. The The present war is, in substance, a struggle between Britain, France, and Germany for the partition of colonies and for the plunder of rival countries. On the part of Tsarism and the ruling classes of Russia, it's an attempt to seize Persia, Mongolia, Turkey in Asia, Constantinople, Galicia, etc. The national element in the Austro-Serbian War is an entirely secondary consideration and does not affect the general imperialist character of the war. The entire economic and diplomatic history of the last few decades shows that both groups of belligerent nations were systematically preparing the very kind of war such as the present. The question of which group dealt the first military blow or first declared war is immaterial in any determination of the tactics of socialists. Both sides' phrases on the defense of the fatherland, resistance to enemy invasion, a war of defense, etc., are nothing but deception of the people. At the bottom of genuinely national wars, such as took place especially between 1789 and 1871, was a long process of mass national movements, of a struggle against absolutism and feudalism, the overthrow of national oppression, and the formation of states on a national basis as a prerequisite of capitalist development. The national ideology created by that epoch left a deep impress on the mass of the petty bourgeoisie and a section of the proletariat. This is now being utilized in a totally different and imperialist epoch by the sophists of the bourgeoisie and by the traitors to socialism who are following in their wake, so as to split the workers and divert them from their class aims and from the revolutionary struggle against the bourgeoisie. The words in the Communist Manifesto that the working men have no country are today truer than ever before. Only the proletariat's international struggle against the bourgeoisie can preserve what it has won and open to the oppressed masses the road to a better future. The slogans of the revolutionary Social Democrats. Quote, "The conversion of the present imperialist war into a civil war is the only correct proletarian slogan, one that follows from the experience of the Commune and outlined in the Basel Resolution, 1912. It has been dictated by all the conditions of an imperialist war between highly developed bourgeois countries." Unquote. Civil war, for which revolutionary social democracy today calls, is an armed struggle of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie, for the expropriation of the capitalist class in the advanced capitalist countries, and for a democratic revolution in Russia, a democratic republic, an 8-hour working day, the confiscation of the landowners' estates, for a republic to be formed in the backward monarchist countries in general, etc. The appalling misery of the masses, which has been created by the war, cannot fail to evoke revolutionary sentiments and movements. The Civil War slogan must serve to coordinate and direct such sentiments and movements. The organization of the working class has been badly damaged. Nevertheless, a revolutionary crisis is maturing. After the war, the ruling classes of all countries will make a still greater effort to throw the proletariat's emancipation movement back for decades. The task of the revolutionary Social Democrats, both in the event of a rapid revolutionary development and in that of a protracted crisis, will not consist in renouncing lengthy and day-by-day work or in discarding any of the old methods of the class struggle, to direct both the parliamentary and the economic struggle against opportunism in the spirit of revolutionary struggle of the masses. Such will be the task. The following should be indicated as the first steps toward converting the present imperialist war into a civil war. 1. An absolute refusal to vote for war credits and resignation from bourgeois governments. 2. A complete break with the policy of a class truce, Bloc National, Bergfrieden. 3. Formation of an underground organization wherever the governments and the bourgeoisie abolish constitutional liberties by introducing martial law. 4. Support for fraternization between soldiers of the belligerent nations, in the trenches and on battlefields in general. 5. Support for every kind of revolutionary mass action by the proletariat in general. Opportunism and the collapse of the Second International. The collapse of the Second International is the collapse of socialist opportunism. The latter has grown as a product of the preceding, quote, peaceful period in the development of the labor movement. That period taught the working class to utilize such important means of struggle as parliamentarianism and all legal opportunities to create mass economic and political organizations, a widespread labor press, etc. On the other hand, the period engendered a tendency to repudiate the class struggle and to preach a class truce, to repudiate the socialist revolution, repudiate the very principle of illegal organizations, to recognize bourgeois patriotism, etc. Certain strata of the working class, the bureaucracy of the labor movement and the labor aristocracy, who get a fraction of the profits from the exploitation of the colonies, and from the privileged position of their, quote, fatherlands in the world market, as well as petty bourgeois sympathizers within the socialist parties, have proved the social mainstay of these tendencies and channels of bourgeois influence over the proletariat. The baneful influence of opportunism has made itself felt most strongly in the policies of most of the official social democratic parties of the Second International during the war. Voting for war credits, participation in governments, the policy of a class truce, the repudiation of an illegal organization when legality has been rescinded. All this is a violation of the International's most important decisions and a downright betrayal of socialism. The Third International. The war-created crisis has exposed the real essence of opportunism as the bourgeoisie's accomplice against the proletariat. The so-called social democratic center, headed by Kautsky, has in practice completely slid into opportunism, behind a cover of exceedingly harmful and hypocritical phrases, and a Marxism falsified to resemble imperialism. Experience shows that in Germany, for instance, a defense of the socialist standpoint has been possible only by resolute opposition to the will of the majority of the party leadership. It would be a harmful illusion to hope that a genuinely socialist international can be restored without a full organizational severance from the opportunists. The Russian Social Democratic Labor Party must support all and every international and revolutionary mass action by the proletariat, and strive to bring together all anti-chauvinist elements in the international. Pacifism and the peace slogan. Pacifism, the preaching of peace in the abstract, is one of the means of duping the working class. Under capitalism, particularly in its imperialist stage, wars are inevitable. On the other hand, however, social democrats cannot overlook the positive significance of revolutionary wars, i.e., not imperialist wars, but such as were fought, for instance, between 1789 and 1871, with the aim of doing away with national oppression and creating national capitalist states out of the feudal, decentralized states, or such wars that may be waged to defend the conquests of the proletariat victorious in its struggle against the bourgeoisie. At the present time, the propaganda of peace, unaccompanied by a call for revolutionary mass action, can only sow illusions and demoralize the proletariat, for it makes the proletariat believe that the bourgeoisie is humane and turns it into a plaything in the hands of the secret diplomacy of the belligerent countries. In particular, the idea of a so-called democratic peace being possible without a series of revolutions is profoundly erroneous. The defeat of the Tsarist monarchy. In each country, the struggle against a government that is waging an imperialist war should not falter at the possibility of that country's defeat as a result of revolutionary propaganda. The defeat of the government's army weakens the government, promotes the liberation of the nationalities it oppresses, and facilitates civil war against the ruling classes. This holds particularly true in respect of Russia. A victory for Russia will bring in its train a strengthening of reaction, both throughout the world and within the country, and will be accompanied by the complete enslavement of the people living in areas already seized. In view of this, we consider the defeat of Russia the lesser evil in all conditions. The attitude toward other parties and groups. The war, which has engendered a spate of chauvinism, has revealed that the democratic, Narodnik intelligentsia, the party of the socialist revolutionaries, or SRs, with complete instability of the oppositional trend, which is centered in Missile, and the main group of liquidators, Nasha Zarya, which is supported by Plekhanov, are all in the grip of chauvinism. In practice, the organizing committee is also on the side of chauvinism, beginning with Larin and Martov's camouflaged support of chauvinism, and ending with Axelrod's defense of the principle of patriotism. So is the Bund, in which a Germanophile chauvinism prevails. The Brussels bloc of July 3, 1914, has disintegrated, while the elements that are grouped around Nasze Slovo are vacillating between a platonic sympathy with internationalism and a striving for unity at any price with Nasha Zarya and the organizing committee. The same vacillation is manifest in Chekaidze's social democratic group. The latter has, on the one hand, expelled the Plekhanovite, i.e. the chauvinist, Mankov. On the other hand, it wishes to cover up, by all possible means, the chauvinism of Plekhanov, Nasha Zarya, Axelrod, the Bund, etc. It is the task of the Social Democratic Labor Party in Russia to consolidate the proletarian unity that was created in 1912-14, mainly by Pravda, and to re-establish the Social Democratic Party organizations of the working class on the basis of a decisive organizational break with the social chauvinists. Footnote there, Pravda was a legal Bolshevik daily newspaper published in St. Petersburg. Additional historical note if you follow the link to the text. Back to the text. Temporary agreements are possible only with those Social Democrats who stand for a decisive organizational rupture with the organizing committee, Nasha Zarya, and the Bund.